core issues related to the International Monetary Fund's function and mission, and that there's a very strong commitment to address our common challenges together.
Inequality comes in many forms, and financial inclusion is key to tackling it.
Financial inclusion. So my first point is financial inclusion is good for financial stability.
My heartfelt gratitude for Qatar's generous contribution to our Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust and to our Resilience and Sustainability Trust. I want to thank the Moroccan authorities for what has been a true celebration of solidarity and multilateralism. You made it possible. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Saturday's IMF Today. I'm your host, Amanda Walker. Today's main event, the IMFC plenary session. That's where the managing director presented her global policy agenda to the IMF governors, setting the IMF's course for the next few months. Our last seminar was on financial inclusion as a pathway to resilient and shared growth. And the Per Jacobsen panel just wrapped up, focusing on building economic resilience in uncertain times. Now, this week's work by the IMFC ended without an official communique. And while the chair and the managing director both seemed pleased with the progress of these meetings at their press briefing today, they also talked about the work still left to be done.
Since our last meeting, the economy has proven more resilient than expected, but the biggest source of uncertainty comes from the rising geopolitical tensions and conflicts. During the meeting, many have expressed strong condemnation against Russia's war against Ukraine, also against the terrorist attacks against Israel, and strong concern about the tragic loss of lives of civilians that are being hurt in the Middle East, in the region. In these rising geopolitical tensions and conflicts, it is more important than ever that we ensure the global economy and geoeconomics continue to be a factor of stability, providing confidence and certainty to the world.
We recognize that it is the most vulnerable countries that are at highest risk in this very turbulent environment. Demand for fund support from low-income countries and vulnerable middle-income countries is at record high. To be able to provide meaningful support, we need more resources for our Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. It is time for solidarity, but solidarity when there is so much tension is hard to build, and yet we have succeeded to do so.
One of the legacies of these meetings will be the Marrakesh Principles for Global Cooperation. It's a statement from Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, World Bank President Ajay Banga, Morocco's Minister of Economy and Finance Nadia Feta, and Bank Al Maghrib Governor Abdelatif Youhari. And it was released earlier this week. They describe it as a call for enhanced global collaboration action on common challenges to build resilience and expand opportunities for a better future. IMF Today spoke with Governor Youhari about what that means to him.
Je dis, de par la conjoncture que nous vivons, cette déclaration apporte des orientations précisément avec les voies de l'espoir. C'est-à-dire que on essaye de faire face à une situation où il faut en quelque sorte qu'on reprenne ensemble, que cette fragmentation, on puisse en quelque sorte en limiter à la fois et l'étendue et les dégâts, et puis reprendre sur ce plan aussi de résilience au niveau du climat, comme maintenant les gens prennent conscience. Et on a trouvé la formule de dire, on a ouvert les portes de l'enfer, il faut plus vite refermer les portes de l'enfer que sur le problème de la lutte contre la pauvreté, de la lutte contre l'exclusion, que l'intégration au niveau de la femme et de son rôle au niveau économique, que particulièrement l'Afrique, qui demain va devenir un levier au niveau de l'activité économique.
Throughout this week, the IMF's 190 member countries have come together to figure out ways to help themselves and each other. Some of those countries are fragile and conflicted states. Others need help facing climate change or other shocks that impact them, but may not be of their own doing. The IMF has different programs to assist, including the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Earlier this week, Qatar pledged to fund both initiatives. And I spoke with Finance Minister, His Excellency Ali bin Ahmed Kuwari, earlier today about the impact that money could have.
We signed an agreement, with the IMF Managing Director, this week to pledge the 20% toward two programs, PRGT and the RST, the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. We believe this is our duty. I think we have substantial SDRs, and we are not in use of this SDRs. Qatar is one of the well-performing countries in terms of economy, in terms of business and surpluses in the budget. So we like really to participate in the IMF program. So when the managing director made the call for countries to help these two funds to participate in the funds, which is gonna put a relief for many people around the globe, it's our duty, and we believe this is the right duties for countries with strong economies.
I'm going to quote the Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva. She said this is a great example of a country that shares its good fortunes with those in need. What's your message to other countries who might think about doing something similar?
Yes. It's very important. I know many countries, they have many programs, whether it's a bilateral program or through the multilateral organizations. But what I would suggest, always better to use the multilateral organization for such programs, because they can administer the programs better. They have, a very well clear set up programs with a clear classifications, and it's better to go through the multilateral organizations for such programs. And it's better than doing it bilaterally, because bilaterally you cannot manage it properly like the multilateral organization like IMF can do. So my message, I think is what I have seen. There was the meeting for the BRGT, and I could see the race between countries, to pledge their SDRs, in the meeting, and this is something it's very encouraging and it's very important. We are one world at the end of the day, and we have to really put our hands together, for the people around the globe who are in need, and they are in an unfortunate situation.
And the meeting's drawing to a close now. Just give me a sense of your impressions of how this has been. We have a rare cloudy day today, but otherwise it's been sunshine and a very vibrant atmosphere here. What's your experience been?
Yes. First of all, I would like, use the platform to really pass our condolences, for the Kingdom of Morocco and the recent devastating earthquake, which was where many lives, got lost, during the disaster. And it's good to see the Moroccan government coming, in a very short period of time, and be prepared for such a huge event, and huge and important event for the world. And also, I'm so happy that IMF, World Bank, they were able to confirm the meeting again, in Morocco, and showing the support for the Moroccan government. Organization is the best, it's really amazing. Very hospitable people, the city itself is a great city with lots of culture, lots of history. The venues is done very well, very organized. The people who are, organizing, the event, from security, from reception, from, everything was excellent, So I think it's one of the best, if not the best, very well organized, IMF World Bank, event.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on IMF Today.
Thank you very much.
On the other end of the spectrum are countries far from the front line of the war in Ukraine that are still impacted by higher food and fuel prices. Right now, Sierra Leone is the chair of the G7+, an organisation of about 20 of these fragile and conflict-affected states. Sheku Bangura is the Minister of Finance in Sierra Leone, and he joins me now. Thank you for your time on IMF Today. So how do these economic spillovers affect the more fragile countries?
Thank you very much, Amanda. So this group of countries, fragile as their names, countries in conflicts or conflict that are they are vulnerable countries, weak capacity, weak institutions, and sometimes weak service delivery, but also even may have problems of war sometimes. Or if there are crises, they have problems in actually recovering from them. Poor countries, there are huge poverty in those countries. So we come together to ensure that we can have a voice to advocate for attention internationally to the interests that we do face as a group of countries. And then ensure that at least we advocate not only and share experiences amongst ourselves on how we respond to the problems that we face. And make sure that institutions like the bank or even the fund or also even the international organizations like the UN systems pay attention and draw the international institutional attention to our problems. What has been happening recently is that you realize that we've been barraged not only with COVID, not only with even the war in Ukraine, for example, that has led into high food prices or prices of even fuel and the like. Problem is, when all of these countries in the world face the same problems like the effect of this crisis, we are disproportionately affected by them.
Can you tell me in what ways? What does that look like on a daily basis?
Well, on a daily basis, what you need to do is, well, poor people, vulnerable people, weaker institutions. So it's whether your fiscal is badly hit because your budget is not able to take on higher prices of fuel, for example, or you're not able to cater for vulnerable people who will require, because of high prices of fuel, that translates into high inflation. You have to ensure that you're able to cater for them to be able to move around. That's one. Second, safety net for them to be able to heck out a living on a daily basis. You need to recalibrate your budget in the way that you provide for them, right? And that is not easy to come by in our systems, for example, because our tax system may be weak. Weakened from weaker revenue basis that doesn't come through that easily because we have to cater for them, and that's not that easy to come by. Now, that's why we need to ensure that institutions like the bank and the fund, when we are trying to recalibrate our programs to take care of our systems to be able to deliver services for poor people within our governments, they are on our back and they are in hand in hand with us to be able to ensure that those programs are actually structured to take care of our interests.
I just wanted to ask you briefly, unfortunately we're running out of time, but tomorrow the work isn't over for you. Tomorrow you'll be joining 22 other ministers of finance for a conference on addressing fragility and conflict as a global public good. The managing director will be there, as well as the World Bank president. Why is it so important for these institutions to remain engaged with these countries?
Well, partnership is the way you draw attention to the interests of countries who don't have the kind of voice. So we come together to be able to ensure that we can speak with one voice and get attention for representation. So that's one. The fund and the bank, the fund in particular, is a global institution that has convening power. But also, I think the program that they set up their own strategy is to make sure that they have boots on the ground, listen to us, tweak their programs in the way that they'll be able to respond to the problems that we put on the table. We have debt problems. Mm-hmm. And you raise debt to do what? To respond to crisis. Let them hear that our debt problems, we are at high risk of debt distress, more than half of our countries. So you want to make sure that the fund is able to listen to our own side of the storyline and make sure that they can tweak their own program and their strategy to respond to our interests. We need more boots on the ground to be able to help us in recalibrating our fiscal policies, our monetary policy that can adapt to respond to the problems that we face. So those are the kind of things we bring to them. But beyond that, I think it's not only the financial programs that they shift, their staff have to be with us as well. when we are trying to think through how to change our policies. So that's what we're going to say to them tomorrow, that we're a group of countries facing peculiar circumstances, whether it's war, whether it's disaster, that meets us. We are not able to respond so easily if we don't have others on our backs. Okay. So we share experiences with ourselves, and then we make these institutions understand exactly where our problems are coming from.
Sheku, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Trust is designed to assist countries hit by shocks they couldn't plan for. Some examples are climate change or the earthquake that hit this country just more than a month ago. And this week, the director of the IMF's Monetary and Capital Markets Department had some praise for the kingdom.
Morocco has been very resilient in the face of adverse shocks. And that resilience is really reflective of the strength of both the economy and the financial system in Morocco. Of course, the IMF has been working closely with the authorities in Morocco and have launched a Resilience and Sustainability Fund just this year in order to increase the preparedness against any possible climate change. So, you know, really impressive economic performance, in particular with respect to this terrible earthquake.
Walking around the city, you can still see signs of damage, but schools in many areas are back open and life is well on the way to returning to some level of normality. IMF Today had a chance to speak with Morocco's Prime Minister earlier this week about the recovery. My colleague Alex Segura was in the seat asking those questions.
Aujourd'hui, non seulement nous avons trouvé des solutions pour sauver les vies, mais également construire l'avenir. Construire l'avenir, Sa Majesté a donné ses instructions pour qu'il y ait un programme de reconstruction, d'abord des maisons qui ont été détruites, et le recensement a commencé. Nous allons commencer bientôt à indemniser les gens par rapport à cela, pour qu'ils puissent reconstruire dans les lieux où ils sont, ou là où ils veulent aller, leur maison. Et en même temps, donc reconstruction, assurer pendant une année un revenu minimum pour ces gens-là, pour qu'ils puissent s'intégrer et revenir à leur terre d'accueil. Et également, nous avons prévu, Sa Majesté a demandé à ce qu'il y ait un programme assez important, économique et social, pour qu'il y ait un service public de grande qualité, mais qu'il y ait des développements, des routes sanitaires pour les hôpitaux, mais également les écoles, reconstruire les écoles, les barrages, tout ce qu'on peut faire pour ces régions qui ont été touchées par le séisme. Et donc, rapidement, le gouvernement a sorti un programme sur lequel aujourd'hui il y a une implémentation.
Quelle est votre vision pour accélérer la croissance et augmenter l'inclusivité, plus de croissance inclusive?
Vous savez, depuis plusieurs années, sous l'impulsion de Sa Majesté, le Maroc a développé plusieurs stratégies sectorielles de développement qui ont touché l'eau, l'agriculture, le commerce, l'industrie, l'industrialisation du pays, la création d'un hub automobile, d'aviation. Oui. Et rapidement, nous avons vu les retombées positives en termes de création d'emplois et en termes de développement de clusters par rapport à ces métiers. Aujourd'hui, Sa Majesté a donné ses hautes instructions pour qu'il y ait aussi le développement d'un État social, solidaire avec la population. Et c'est pour ça que nous travaillons pour la mise en œuvre de l'orientation de Sa Majesté pour mettre en place un système d'allocation familiale, l'assurance maladie obligatoire qui va toucher presque l'ensemble de la population. C'est une première expérience africaine, l'ensemble de la population marocaine, mais également on va essayer d'aller pour aider et accompagner les populations les plus démunies.
Alors, quelle est pour vous, à votre avis, quelle est la contribution des institutions comme le FMI et la Banque mondiale? Quelle devrait être leur contribution pour aider le pays comme le Maroc?
Bien sûr, tout le monde a la préoccupation de chercher les équilibres fondamentaux, le déficit, la croissance, ainsi de suite, pour que le pays continue à ne pas s'endetter à l'avenir. Mais donc ça nécessite des financements, ça nécessite des projets d'investissement, et il ne faut pas se tromper d'investissement. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut aller dans les secteurs qui peuvent apporter de la valeur ajoutée économique ou sociale pour le pays. Mais également, ces pays sont confrontés à des chocs exogènes. Oui. Vous tracez le cas par rapport à un déficit prévu, mais vous avez des chocs qui arrivent. Ces chocs, ils sont récurrents aujourd'hui. Oui. Ils reviennent. Ce que nous avons vécu au Maroc, 5 ans de manque de pluie, donc il y a une sécheresse. La problématique de l'inflation liée à la guerre en Europe ou liée à autre chose est importante. Le tremblement de terre, le séisme qu'on a eu dernièrement, c'est un facteur aussi qui est important. Donc, à cela, il faut apporter une solution à ces chocs qui, à travers ce qu'on voit, risquent de se répéter dans le monde. Donc, il faut vraiment qu'il y ait une vision où on accompagne les États à travers les financements, mais pas seulement central, mais sur les banques aussi multilatérales qui existent un peu partout dans le monde, pour les équilibres des États, mais également de regarder comment rapidement agir quand il y a des chocs comme ça exogènes.
Morocco's economy is thriving as these meetings came to the country.
GDP has tripled over the last 20 years, fueled by growth in the agricultural, industrial and service sectors. Those represent 12, 23 and just more than 50% of GDP. Nearly 46% of the active population works in the service sector. That's mainly driven by real estate and tourism. 11 million tourists visited Morocco in 2022, and these meetings can certainly contribute to those numbers in 2023.
And that sort of growth is a big part of what these meetings are about. Growth, resilience and global cooperation are some of the themes we've heard a lot of talk about this week. And it's a week that's nearing its end. It's been a monumental effort on all fronts. Years of meticulous content planning, months of arduous construction, some of it in the aftermath of the earthquake. It was a big team effort that ultimately produced this incredible campus, the beautiful setting for 190 countries to come together and try and find some answers to these challenging times. So, how did it all go and what's next? Joining me now is IMF Communications Director Julie Kozak. Hi Julie.
Hello.
Tell me, what stood out for you this week?
Well, first, Morocco stood out. The people, the food, the amazing culture, soccer.
Right, yeah.
But of course also the sense of strength and the sense of community that brought the country together after the tragic earthquake of just a few weeks ago. And our hearts mourn for those who lost their lives and their families. But we had an opportunity to see this strength and sense of community when we visited a school in one of the affected areas. The school itself had been badly damaged, but we saw how the community came together with support from the government to ensure that children were back in school. So Morocco absolutely stood out for us. The other thing that stood out is something that we've been saying for quite some time now, that the world is shock prone and uncertain. And that, that theme also is very relevant for these meetings in this particular time.
Yeah, and what do you think? We've heard so much. There is so much content at these meetings, isn't there, in all of these tents that have been set up, so many conversations, so many debates. What do you think the key messages have been that policymakers will walk away from these meetings with?
I think there are three key messages. The first is that the global economy, the global economic recovery, is both slow and uneven. and that medium-term growth is the weakest in decades. So what does this mean for policymakers? This is the second takeaway, is that policymakers need to act on this. And they need to do it, I would say, in two broad ways. The first is by strengthening economic fundamentals. So price stability is key. Fiscal prudence to help reduce deficits, reduce debt, very important. Even maybe now more important than ever. And of course, maintaining financial stability, also critical. It's also important for policymakers to think about the medium term. What are those transformational reforms that they can begin to take now that will create the conditions for stronger growth over the medium term, to lift growth over the medium term? And then the third big area is international cooperation, which I think you mentioned even in the introduction. These meetings bring the global community together. International cooperation is extremely important now more than ever. And we've seen very obvious areas where it's important: debt, climate, trade. For us at the IMF, we're very heartened that the membership was able to come together to agree and support an increase in our quota resources, our permanent resources. We're heartened that the membership was able to come together and close our subsidy gap for our instrument for lending to low-income countries. This means we can now continue to lend at zero interest rates to our low-income members. And we're also very heartened that the membership was able to come together and agree to have a third African chair at the board of the IMF.
And the meeting's drawing to a close, but the work never stops at the IMF, does it? What comes next?
Well, more work,
right.
I think is the answer. What happens after the meetings, the membership speaks, they give us guidance, they take decisions, and then it is our job as staff, admittedly after we maybe take a little bit of a breather and refresh and recharge the batteries, to get back to work to implement those decisions and that guidance that the membership has given us. And why is that so important? Because our ultimate goal is to serve our membership and to help our members improve prospects for their people.
I know you're no stranger to annual meetings, but it's your first set in this role as Director of Communications. Tell me, how's it been for you?
It has been an experience of gratitude and awe. Gratitude to our partners in Morocco, who partnered with us for many, many years. Because remember, these meetings were supposed to take place in 2020, and they were postponed because of the pandemic. So I'm very grateful to the support and the wonderful partnership we have with the Moroccan authorities. Also to our partners at the World Bank, of course, our typical partner in these annual meetings. And of course, extremely grateful to my own staff, both in the communications department, but also to our very close partners in the Secretary's Department, in corporate services. It's been wonderful to see how we've been able to come together as a team to make these meetings happen. And that's the awe part, right? As we look around, it is awe-inspiring to see what we have been able to accomplish, and the area, the venue we have been able to put together to bring our membership together to make these important decisions.
Yeah, none of it possible without that teamwork. Julie Kozak, thank you so much for your time on IMF Today.
Thank you very much.
Now, before leaving Morocco, the managing director was invited for an audience with His Majesty King Mohammed VI. She and the World Bank president were also on hand as the King addressed Parliament. Today is our last day with you on IMF Today, but there are still events at these meetings tomorrow. Sunday morning will include the signing ceremony for the 2026 annual meetings, and this session's fiscal forum will look at improving tax capacity in developing countries. Now, before we leave you, let's talk a bit about the future. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva was asked about it during her Global Policy Agenda press conference earlier this week. Specifically, with shock after shock after shock, things like the pandemic, war, climate change, natural disasters, how can the IMF and other institutions adjust to better anticipate those shocks? And how do you change the way you assess those risks? Here's her answer.
I cannot predict today how this would evolve. All I can say is that in a world where geopolitical tensions can flare quickly, we have to have the concentration on two things. What is it that we must cooperate on, because otherwise the world would be in trouble, like climate change. And two, where we can pragmatically define a path for cooperation in a way that bridges different views. And I can tell you, Andrea, you know me, I'm unwavering optimist. We define our destiny. So, as difficult as it might be, engage in discussions, identify areas of consensus, build on this consensus to take decisions that would improve the fate of people everywhere. Relentless. This is what we must be.
And what a great note to end our week on. It's hard to believe, but this is our last IMF Today broadcast from here in Marrakesh. We hope we've helped you get a sense of the issues, the discussions, and the people here at these annual meetings. Many thanks to our fabulous crew here in Marrakesh and back on the ground in Washington, D.C. We'll leave you, as we have all week, with more photos from the fantastic IMF photography team. I'm Amanda Walker, and this is IMF Today.